Everyone says INFJs are contradictory, that they contain multiples, that they shift between selves without warning, and that no single description ever quite holds. You have probably said this about yourself, but the question no one is asking is not why you feel fragmented. The question is why the fragmentation feels like it is pointing at something, like it is trying to tell you the shape of who you actually are. Welcome to Power and Myth. There is a version of this conversation that most personality channels have already had with you. They call it the paradox of the INFJ. They list the contradictions: intensely private but craving deep connection, fiercely independent but longing to belong, idealistic but capable of a cold, clear-eyed realism that surprises even you. They frame this as the INFJ's defining complexity, the thing that makes you simultaneously difficult to categorize and endlessly fascinating to write about. And they are not wrong. The contradictions are real. You have felt them. You have probably exhausted yourself trying to reconcile them and find the single coherent self underneath it all. That effort, the effort to find the one true self, is where the suffering lives. The common explanation for INFJ fragmentation is psychological. You are a deeply empathic type, thinking goes, which means you absorb the emotional environments you move through. You adapt, you mirror, you take on the frequencies of the people and places around you, and sometimes you lose yourself inside that absorption. The fragmentation is the cost of that permeability. You are too porous, too responsive. The self that emerges in one context looks almost unrecognizable compared to the self that emerges in another, and the gap between them creates a feeling of being split. There is truth in this. Introverted intuition, the dominant cognitive function of the INFJ, does operate through a kind of deep environmental scanning. NI absorbs patterns from the unconscious and translates them into coherent wholes, and in doing so, it reads the world at a depth that leaves the INFJ perpetually aware of undercurrents that others have not detected. The empathic quality is not separate from the cognitive one. It is the same function, working on the emotional and psychological data of the room. So yes, you absorb, you adapt, you translate yourself across contexts in ways that can feel like you are disappearing. But watch what that explanation does not account for. It does not account for the fact that the different selves you inhabit do not feel like versions of a single self, stretched thin across different environments. They feel like distinct orientations, distinct ways of being in the world, each with its own center of gravity, its own relationship to other people, its own kind of knowing. When you are in the mode that withdraws into solitude, you are not simply introversion expressing itself. Something in you is doing something specific that requires isolation. When you are in the mode that speaks with a strange, calm authority about things you have no rational basis for knowing, that is not simply empathy. Something else is operating. When you are in the mode that burns with a quiet, implacable sense of mission, that is not simply idealism. Something in you has located a purpose so fundamental that it reorganizes everything around it. The explanation that you are too porous, too absorbed, too stretched does not reach these distinct orientations. It cannot explain why each one feels so complete in itself, why each one has its own relationship to shadow, its own wound, its own gift, why none of them feels like a costume you put on and take off, even when they seem to contradict one another. Here is the question the surface explanation cannot answer. If the fragmentation was simply the cost of permeability, the self that existed before the absorption began would be whole. You would feel fragmented in context and coherent in solitude. But that is not what INFJs describe. The fragmentation does not resolve in solitude, it deepens, because it is in solitude, in the quiet, that all of the orientations become audible simultaneously. The hermit withdrawing into sacred isolation, the seer is scanning the unconscious for what it is trying to surface. The exile feels the old unnamed sense of not quite belonging anywhere, not even to itself. The seeker restless even in stillness, looking for something it cannot name. In solitude you do not find the single coherent self, you find the gathering. What if the fragmentation is not a symptom of permeability? What if it is a structure? What if what you have been calling your contradictions are actually distinct archetypal patterns, each one coherent, each one ancient, each one present in you? not because you absorbed it from your environment, but because you were built to carry it. This is what Jungian archetypal psychology describes when it maps the dominant patterns of the nedominant psyche. Jung identified archetypes as the primary structural units of the unconscious, not as metaphors but as actual organizing patterns of human psychological experience that recur across cultures and across time. What the INFJ carries is not a single archetype, it is a configuration. And the configuration has 7 distinct orientations, each one corresponding to a different relationship between the INFJ's deep perception and the world they inhabit. The Seer, the Seeker, the Wounded Healer, the Hermit, the Shapeshifter, the Exile, the Guardian of Thresholds. These are not personality traits distributed across different INFJs, they are the 7 patterns that exist, in different proportions and different degrees of activation, within a single INFJ psyche. The fragmentation you have been trying to diagnose and repair is the 7 archetypes becoming audible, not a malfunction, a map. The seer in you perceives the pattern beneath the surface of what people say and does not know how to explain how it knows. The hermit in you requires withdrawal, not as a preference but as a cognitive necessity, because introverted intuition cannot process at depth in a noisy environment. The exile in you carries the ancient recognition that you were never quite inside the world the others inhabited. The wounded healer in you has located the place where your deepest wound and your deepest gift are the same thing. The shapeshifter in you translates across contexts, not through deception, but through exhausting, compassionate service to the humans you encounter. The seeker in you will never be fully satisfied with any answer that does not reach deep enough. And the guardian of thresholds stands at the edge of every significant transition in your life and in the lives of the people you love, holding the passage open. You are not fragmented, you are plural. And there is a difference. Fragmentation implies that something whole has been broken. Plurality implies that what you are was always this much. The question is not how to make yourself whole. The question is how to understand which archetype you are living most fully right now, and which one is waiting in the shadow, asking to be integrated. That is what we explore here. This is the beginning of the 7 INFJ Archetypes Framework, not a taxonomy. It is an initiation into the ancient patterns that have been organizing your experience for your entire life without your knowing their names. Which of the 7 do you feel most fully, and which one do you feel the pull of from the shadow, the one you have been avoiding, misunderstanding or suppressing because you did not know it was yours? Tell me in the comments. This is how we do it at Power and Myth, not by arriving at answers, but by learning which questions are worth asking. If you want to go deeper into the 7 archetypes, subscribe. We are only at the beginning of this map. Until next time, find your power, know your myth.